The grand halls of the Jaron Space Academy stretched before Tobias Crane, their walls shimmering with the collective history of 1,000 worlds. This was not a place where humans typically thrived, or were even welcome. For centuries, the best minds and greatest warriors from across the galaxy had trained within these hallowed walls. But now Tobias, a human war strategist, stood at the Academy's heart, chosen as an instructor against all odds. He walked down the corridor, his boots tapping softly on the polished floor. The Academy's alien students eyed him with a mix of curiosity and disdain. Humans had never been seen as equals in the galaxy, and their military tactics, while primitive by comparison to some alien races, had never truly been tested on a galactic scale. Tobias was no ordinary man, though. He had seen battlefields on Earth and beyond, countless campaigns where strategy and survival had always been on the razor's edge. Now, he was tasked with training these skeptical alien students for a war they hadn't yet seen but were certain to face. His first class awaited him. 6 students from different species, each hand-picked for their unique abilities. They sat at long, sleek desks in the Academy's combat briefing room. Holographic displays flickered above their heads, showing various galactic battle formations. Tobias scanned their faces, taking in their varied forms. Kael'thor, a massive Drixian, sat at the back, arms crossed, his reptilian eyes fixed on Tobias with thinly veiled contempt. His race was known for their brute strength and formidable combat prowess. Beside him, Zera, an Ethian, whose species was revered for speed and reflexes, stared silently, her silver skin gleaming under the artificial lights. The others, Rylos, Gyron, Talvok, and Un, each had their own specialties, but the atmosphere in the room was thick with skepticism. Kael'thor broke the silence first, his voice deep and rumbling like distant thunder. A human, teaching us warfare? The Academy must be desperate. A ripple of agreement moved through the room. Tobias met Kael'thor's gaze evenly, refusing to rise to the bait. "Desperation often breeds innovation," he said calmly, "and you'll find that what I teach isn't something you've encountered in your textbooks." Zera's eyes narrowed, her voice cutting through the air like a blade. "What could you possibly know that we don't already?" Tobias smiled slightly. "Let's find out. Field exercises. All of you. Combat arena. Now." The students exchanged surprised glances. Field exercises on the first day? Tobias didn't wait for them to question his orders. He turned and strode out of the room, expecting them to follow. In the Academy's combat arena, the artificial landscape shifted with each exercise, sometimes dense jungle, other times a barren wasteland. Today, Tobias had selected a rocky terrain, with craggy cliffs and narrow pathways, perfect for testing how the students moved in unfamiliar environments. The students stood in a line, dressed in their combat suits, waiting for Tobias to explain the scenario. He didn't. Instead, he activated the simulation with a flick of his wrist. Immediately, the arena's walls shimmered, and the landscape transformed into a desolate, war-torn battlefield. Above them, blackened clouds swirled, and the ground beneath their feet was uneven, dotted with craters and jagged rocks. "Survive," Tobias said simply, his voice carrying over the rising wind. "Together." Before they could ask what he meant, the first attack came. Automated drones, sleek and silent, emerged from the cliffs. They opened fire with stunning speed, their plasma bolts cutting through the air. Kael'thor reacted first, raising his thick arms to deflect the incoming shots with his natural armor. Zera moved like lightning, darting between the rocks, avoiding the blasts with effortless agility. The others scrambled for cover, their movements less coordinated but instinctive. Tobias watched from a distance, arms folded. His students were good, better than he had expected, but they weren't working as a team. Kael'Thor's brute strength kept him exposed for too long, while Zera moved so fast that she had outpaced the rest of her team. Rylos, the technician, was trying to hack into the drone systems, but he was too focused on his task, leaving himself vulnerable. "Focus," Tobias called out. "This isn't about individual skill. It's about coordination." Another wave of drones descended, their fire more intense. This time, Gyron, a smaller creature with sharp claws, was grazed by a plasma bolt. He yelped in pain, but kept moving. Talvik, the team's sniper, tried to take down the drones from a distance, but was struggling to get clear shots in the chaos. Tobias sighed. They weren't ready. "Kael'Thor," he shouted. "Draw their fire. Move toward the cliffs and take cover behind the largest rock formation." The Drixian hesitated for a moment, clearly unused to taking orders from a human, but the urgency in Tobias's voice left no room for argument. Kael'Thor charged toward the cliffs, his heavy footsteps shaking the ground. As expected, the drones shifted their focus toward him. "Zera," Tobias continued. "Use Kael'Thor's cover. Get behind the drones and flank them." Without a word, Zera moved, her lithe form disappearing behind the rocks. Tobias turned to Rylos. "Rylos, I need those drones offline. Now." Rylos's hands flew across his datapad, his 4 fingers moving with expert precision. "I'm working on it." The drones concentrated their fire on Kael'Thor, who grunted as he deflected the shots with his arms. Just as they closed in, Zera emerged from the shadows, her twin blades slicing through 2 drones in quick succession. The rest of the team followed her lead, moving as one. "Now!" Tobias barked. Rylos hit a final key, and the remaining drones sputtered and fell to the ground, their systems fried. The battlefield fell silent, save for the distant rumble of simulated thunder. The students stood, panting, their armor scorched and bodies bruised, but alive. Tobias approached them slowly, his expression unreadable. "You can't win this war alone," he said, his voice softer now. "Not against the enemy we'll face. You need each other." Kael'Thor, still breathing heavily, stared at Tobias with a mixture of respect and frustration. "You're right," the Drixian admitted grudgingly. "I underestimated you, human." Tobias nodded. "It won't be the last time. But from now on, we train together, as a unit." The students exchanged glances, their skepticism tempered by the hard-earned lesson. They were far from perfect, but they had the potential to be something far greater, if they could learn to trust one another. And with the unknown threat looming just beyond the stars, they would need every bit of that trust to survive what was coming. Weeks had passed since Tobias Crane had taken control of the training, and the transformation in his students was undeniable. They had begun as a disjointed group, each focused on their own strengths, but now they moved like a well-oiled machine. Their individual abilities had been sharpened, but more importantly, Tobias had taught them how to work as a cohesive unit. They had survived grueling drills, ambush simulations, and surprise exercises, but none of that prepared them for what came next. The warning klaxons blared through the Academy's halls one evening. The distant hum of the Academy's shield systems activated, casting an eerie glow through the windows as the defensive grid came online. Tobias rushed to the war room, a sense of urgency growing in his chest. He had been expecting this, though he hadn't imagined it would happen so soon. When he arrived, the scene was tense. A holographic projection floated in the middle of the room, showing the vastness of space just beyond the Academy's outer systems. The unknown fleet had arrived, massive, sleek ships that looked more like living organisms than mechanical constructs. They hovered at the system's edge, unmoving, as if observing. "They haven't made any moves yet," said Commander Lyavoth, an imposing figure with deep blue skin and a long, flowing uniform adorned with medals from countless galactic campaigns. But we have no idea what they want or who they are. Tobias studied the enemy fleet on the display. It was unlike anything he had ever seen. No standard formations, no obvious command ships, and no apparent weaknesses. He could feel the tension in the room, the unease of the Academy's most seasoned strategists. This enemy wasn't playing by any known rules. "They're not waiting for us," Tobias said after a long pause. "They're testing us. They're watching how we react. This is a probe." Lyavoth turned to him, skepticism flickering in his eyes. "And what would you suggest, human? Our fleet is ready to engage." Tobias shook his head. "If we engage them head-on, we lose. We don't know their capabilities, and they've chosen the battlefield. We need to draw them out, disrupt their plans before they can launch an offensive." "And how do you propose we do that?" another officer, a slim Ivorian strategist, asked. Tobias looked around the room, meeting their eyes. "We hit their supply lines. We cripple their communications. We make them bleed before they even reach us. We do it fast, and we do it surgically." Lyavoth's brow furrowed. "You're talking about a strike team." "Yes," Tobias replied, his voice calm and steady, "and I have just the team in mind." Within the hour, Tobias and his 6 students were suited up, standing in the launch bay of the Academy's stealth cruiser. The students looked ready, though tension filled the air. This wasn't another simulation. This was real, and the stakes couldn't be higher. Kael'thor stood at the front of the group, his massive frame making him look like a walking tank. He glanced at Tobias, his expression grim. "I assume you have a plan, human?" "I always have a plan," Tobias said with a slight smile. "We're going to infiltrate their fleet, plant charges on their supply ships, and take down their communication relays. Rylos will hack into their systems and sow as much chaos as possible." Zera, her silver skin glinting in the dim light, checked her weapons. "How do we get in without being blown to bits before we even land?" Tobias pointed to the stealth cruiser behind them. "This ship has been modified with a cloaking device. We'll get in close before they even know we're there. But once we're inside, it's on us to move quickly." The team nodded, their expressions hardening with determination. This was it, their first real test against an enemy whose power and intentions were still unknown. But if anyone could pull this off, it was them. The stealth cruiser glided silently through space, its cloaking field shimmering as it approached the enemy fleet. Inside, the crew was tense but focused. Tobias stood at the command console, monitoring their approach. The alien ships were even more imposing up close, massive organic structures that pulsed with an eerie bioluminescence, like creatures from some long-forgotten abyss. "We're in range," Rylos said, his fingers flying over the controls. "Their sensor nets haven't detected us yet." "Good," Tobias said, his voice low. "Bring us in close to the main supply ship. We'll plant the charges and get out before they know what hit them." The cruiser maneuvered into position, settling just beneath the belly of one of the largest alien ships. The students readied themselves for the mission ahead. Tobias led the way to the airlock, where they would breach the enemy vessel. As they disembarked, the vast scale of the alien ship became even more apparent. Its hull seemed to pulse like a living organism, and the air around it crackled with energy. The team moved swiftly, their movements precise and silent, as they began planting the charges at critical points along the ship's structure. Zera moved with incredible speed, her form a blur as she zipped from one point to the next. Kael'thor took up a defensive position, his massive frame ready to engage any resistance. Rylos stayed near the ship's control systems, hacking into the alien networks to scramble their communications. Suddenly, the ship seemed to come alive. Lights flickered on across its surface, and a deep, resonating hum filled the air. "They know we're here," Tobias said grimly. "Move faster." Without warning, the ship's defense systems activated. Automated turrets unfolded from the walls, firing streams of plasma at the team. Kale Thor charged forward, his armor deflecting the brunt of the fire. "Cover me!" he roared, smashing one of the turrets with his massive fists. Zera darted between cover, her reflexes saving her from a deadly shot. She returned fire with pinpoint accuracy, disabling several of the turrets in quick succession. The rest of the team moved in sync, each playing their role perfectly as they advanced deeper into the ship. "Rylos!" Tobias shouted. "How close are you to shutting down their systems?" Rylos's eyes darted over his datapad as alien symbols scrolled past. "Almost there. Just a few more seconds." A new wave of drones appeared from the shadows, hovering menacingly as they opened fire. Talvik, the team's sniper, dropped into a crouch and picked them off one by one, his steady hand never wavering. Gyron, with his sharp claws and quick agility, moved alongside him, slicing through drones with surgical precision. The charges were set, and Rylos finally gave a shout of triumph. "Got it! Their systems are scrambled. They won't know what hit them." Tobias gave the signal to retreat, and the team moved quickly back to the cruiser. As they boarded, the charges detonated in a series of bright, fiery explosions, tearing through the alien ship's hull. The once formidable supply vessel now drifted in space, crippled and defenseless. Back on the stealth cruiser, Tobias exhaled in relief as they pulled away, cloaked once more. The enemy fleet was in chaos, their communications severed, their supply lines cut. But this was only the beginning. They had struck a blow, but the full weight of the unknown enemy was yet to come. Tobias turned to his students, who were still catching their breath from the intense battle. "Good work," he said, his voice steady. "But this is far from over. We've made our move. Now we see how they respond." The team nodded, their faces a mix of exhaustion and resolve. They had faced the unknown and survived, but they knew the true war was only just beginning. I hope you had a good time. If you liked my story, do not forget to comment and subscribe to my channel. Goodbye. See you in the next story.